Welcome to our sneak peek program. I'm Jane Lavino, the Sugden Chief Curator of Education. These titles, we don't usually use the full version of the title, so I always have to stop and think about it for a second. But we're really excited to have you here today. As I said, 2 new exhibits, and one of them is actually 2 exhibits within one, so it's essentially 3 new exhibits opening today. The sneak peek program is truly that. If you were here 5 minutes ago, you would have seen the curatorial team in there adjusting things, vacuuming. So it officially opens tomorrow, the Rungius exhibits, and the Somos de Aqui exhibit, which we're about to hear about, officially opens on Sunday with the First Sunday program. But they're essentially ready, so you're in for a treat. So the idea with these programs is to get you in there and be the first ones to see it, also to let you hear from the experts. It's a short program, about 15 minutes for each location, so we hope to wrap up in about 30 minutes, and then you're invited to come in for lunch, and there's a discount for lunch. I'm going to say this now because I might forget later. If you want to go in for lunch, it's a 10% discount if you attended the program, and all you need to do is, to your server, remind them that you attended the program and say the code is SNEAK19, the year. SNEAK19 is the code to get that 10% discount. Okay, a little bit about the exhibit we're about to walk into, Somos de Aqui, the Enduring Wildlife of Puerto Rico. You're going to be hearing from Lisa Simmons-Durden, who is our Associate Curator of Education and Outreach at the museum, as well as from Lina Collado, and those 2 are standing at the back here. They're waving to you right now. Lina has served as co-curator with Lisa for the exhibition, as well as being the photographer, videographer, anything you can think of pretty much, label writer, installer, all of those things for this exhibition. You might also know Lena in our community as Teton Literacy's Family Literacy Manager. We are very grateful to our sponsors for Somos de Aqui, who are the Community Foundation of Jackson Hole, the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, Lisa Carlin, Nancy and Dick Collister, the Smart Family Fund, Community Foundation of Jackson Hole Youth Philanthropists, and Stinky Prints, who printed the photos that you're about to see.
And labels.
And the labels. Great. When we get to the Rungius exhibition, and just in case we lose some people who are a little slower making the move back across Sullivan Hall, I want to mention that the Rungius exhibits are under the umbrella of Rungius Sesquicentennial, which you may not be familiar with that term, but it's 150th anniversary of Carl Rungius's birth. And when we move into those spaces, Dr. Adam Harris will be speaking about them. He is our Jaffa Kerr Chief Curator of Art. I got that right. And he's going to be speaking about the 2 exhibits, Rungius Reunited and Rungius Adam, help me out.
Rarely Seen.
Rungius Rarely Seen. So many titles. And we are indebted for those exhibits to the following sponsors: Thomas and Elizabeth Granger, Gloria and Bill Newton, Anne and Michael Moran, and Tally and Bill Minks. But let's start by moving into the Wapiti Gallery and welcome Lisa and Lina.
Welcome everyone, my name is Lisa Simmons. Jane, thank you for introducing us. And this is Lina Collado Garcia, sort of the heart of this exhibit in many ways. Does anybody, if everyone can be really quiet for a second, can anybody tell me what the noise is that you hear? Coqui frogs? Yeah, so this is the coqui frog, sort of the icon of Puerto Rico, and a major theme in this exhibit. So it's a fitting soundtrack. This is heard island-wide in Puerto Rico. When the sun sets, it's the mating call of the male coqui frog. So I've had the fortune of working with Lina and her ESL class, English as a Second Language class, both adult learners and their children, from Teton Literacy Center for 2 years now, helping them to develop their English skills and visual literacy. with the museum's fabulous art collection as the teacher. The museum used Lena's class and a selection of Jackson nonprofits that serve the Latino community as focus groups to inform the museum's Latino Engagement Initiative that was supported by both the Community Foundation and the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, two organizations that also supported this exhibit. Under the auspices of this initiative, we were able to translate all permanent collection gallery labels into Spanish, which are available in the galleries now, develop a welcome and orientation video in Spanish, and create a Spanish language tab on our website, also translating a family-friendly mobile tour into Spanish. If you haven't checked out our museum app, there's some amazing tours on that. You can download it for free. Let me know if you have any questions. Highly recommend it. Although all of these things are a step in the right direction, I knew our initiative would fall flat unless we were able to feature an exhibit with Latino voices and artwork, all presented in Spanish. Museums should reflect the communities that they serve. Through Somos Aqui, we are taking another step in that direction with Wyoming's first fully bilingual large-scale art exhibit that you're in right now. The title for the exhibit, Somos Aqui, was chosen because it is not only a popular Puerto Rican saying, Somos Aqui, como el coqui, we are from here, like the coqui. It also demonstrates an idea that all of us can relate to, that people in Wyoming and Puerto Rico, and across the world, share a close connection to place and to wildlife. We might say, we are from here, like the bison. Puerto Rico is a territory of the U.S., its inhabitants U.S. citizens. As a National Museum of Wildlife Art, we are talking about Puerto Rico and its stunning biodiversity as enhancing the biodiversity of the nation.
Every single voice, every single photographer, and everyone featured in this exhibit is Puerto Rican. So it was my way of making sure that our voices are being heard, and our species that are currently endangered or struggling through the many hurricanes that the island has struggled and the devastating economy at the moment, that we had a chance to educate other people on what's going on and give them a voice. So with this said, if you go around the exhibit, you will see that it first starts with a little bit of history about the island, about where it is, in case some of you do not know where it is, and a little bit about the island itself. And then we feature something that was very interesting within our creation of the exhibit, is that we do have an animal in common between Puerto Rico and Wyoming, which is our osprey. The osprey migrates from Wyoming to Puerto Rico for a majority of its life and then travels back. So it does visit islands like Cuba, like Puerto Rico, and in the Caribbean area. So that was our biggest connection of not only bringing it back to where we currently are, but also remembering that it is important to protect Puerto Rico, because if Puerto Rico falls, there's species that are very endearing and that we treasure here in Wyoming, like the osprey, that will be affected. So from there, there's two big habitats that I felt like I needed to feature, that all of our species at some point have either lived or been part of these habitats. One of them is our Junca National Forest, which is the only tropical rainforest in our National Forest Service system. And in addition to that, there is Mona Island, which is a nature reserve between Puerto Rico, is located between Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. And it is considered the Galapagos of the Caribbean. Not many people know about this island because no one lives in it. It is only rangers, biologists, and people with permits that can visit the island. Fortunately, my brother is one of those permit holders, so I was able to visit the island, and I have for already 3 times, which is a beautiful little gem that we have. And within those 2 habitats, you find these 4 species: the sea turtle, the bats, and the Puerto Rican parrot, and the coqui frog. Those 4 species either are endangered or critically endangered, like is the Puerto Rican parrot. Before Hurricane Maria, there was about 180 wild parrots population in the island. After Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma, there's only 82 left in the entire island. So it is very, very dangerous and fragile situation that it is our last population that we have. And this is the only parrot within the U.S. territory in terms of the area of the United States. So it is a very, very, very important species. In addition to that, we have, like Lisa said, the coqui frog, which is a national symbol of Puerto Rico. You will find it anywhere you go. from Old San Juan tourist memorabilia to our petroglyphs of our Taínos, which is our first inhabitants of Puerto Rico. It was such a common species over the island that if you go to different parts of the island, you will find humongous rocks with the petroglyph of the coqui. And in addition to that, it is our orchestra every single night. No matter where you go in Puerto Rico, unless you're in a boat in the middle of the ocean, you'll hear the coqui frog. And it's a really important thing to know that there's 17 different species. 3 of them have been extinct, so there's 14 left in Puerto Rico, but each one has a different song. So the one that you hear right now is the common coqui, and that's the one that is found all over the island. But if you go, for example, to Mona, the coqui frog there sounds like a drop of water, which is a very, very different song that they have. The reason that it evolved is because many, many thousands of years ago, obviously some coqui population traveled in a branch or in a tree, who knows how they got there, but they evolved to the point where they lived in caves because the Mona is so dry that they adapted their voice to sound like the drops falling from the caves so that other animals wouldn't eat them. And that is how you have 2 species that started from the same place and now they're completely different. And you see that through many areas of Puerto Rico, through the 14 species of coqui. They each have a story and they each have a different song. So it is a very, very important and just precious species that we have that we feel like we need to protect and make sure that everyone knows about it. So they join us in the efforts of wanting to protect it. And in addition to that, everything that you see here, like Lisa said, everything is first in Spanish. So either the labels are first in Spanish or the 3 videos, 3 short films that I highly encourage everyone to watch, provides more information, but they're also in Spanish, subtitled in English. Mostly because that was another very important thing for me in making sure that this exhibit was told through the language that we have in Puerto Rico and with our Latino community here in Jackson, and offer it in other languages so it's more understood from people from all over the world. And is there anyone who has any questions that would like to ask?
I do. Yes. How close is the Puerto Rican Spanish to, say, the Mexican or the Central American Spanish?
It is close and not close. We speak very fast, so it is very different than, let's say, Central Latin America. And we also drop certain words and certain intonations that, for example, Mexico does not. There's sometimes many words that I say to my students, for my ESL students, that they suddenly look at me like, what are you saying? And it's because it's a completely different word that they might use for the same language. It's very interesting. You even find differences between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, which were right next to each other. So, any other questions?
You said the little frog lives in a cave.
The one in Mona. Yes.
Okay, but then they're mostly tree frogs, are they?
Yes, okay. They're mostly tree frogs. Mona's frog, when I went last time in December, I found it out in the open. So they're definitely moving out of the caves and adapting to dry environments, which is very, very rare and also pretty incredible because Mona rains very, very rarely. It's not as Yunque, which rains every single day. Yunque is the most humid and wet area in the entire island, and that's why it has one of the highest biodiversities of Puerto Rico, of the whole island. Questions? Okay. Well, I strongly and I please encourage you all to enjoy it, to read about it, to learn about Puerto Rico, which is a very, very close island to us. And if you have some time, please watch the videos. Like I said, they provide the perspective of these biologists who have been working their entire lives, or 30, 40, 50 plus years, in trying to save these species and protect them against a very hard current economy and also to devastating hurricanes. So their efforts are ones that are very inspiring, and how they have been able to motivate normal average citizens into joining their efforts and protecting them, especially in the sea turtles. The biggest efforts they have done is using normal citizens that have joined, united, formed nonprofit organizations that have actually protected large areas of the island in order to make sure that we can continue having large amounts of nestings within the beaches of Puerto Rico. And obviously the parrots, if it wasn't for them, it wouldn't exist. So as simple as that, they are crucial in the formula of maintaining the Puerto Rican parrot alive. So I strongly encourage everyone to read them, to listen to them. I'm sorry the cookie is still, I'm exporting it right now outside of the front desk. It had a glitch. So as soon as that's done, I'm going to plug it in and you'll be able to watch it. Thank you.
One more minute I have. Lena mentioned the Puerto Rican biologist. We are very honored to have a renowned Puerto Rican biologist who studies the biodiversity of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean islands in general, Dr. Rafael Juglar. He will be here in Jackson giving presentations in both English and Spanish about the biodiversity of Puerto Rico. The presentations are free, open to the public, family friendly, and will be held in the auditorium right over here, Sunday, June 2nd. That's the English talk from 1 to 2 p.m. And in Spanish, it will be that evening from 6 to 7. So we hope you'll join us for one of those.
This year is the 150th anniversary of the Sesquicentennial, which is a really fun word to say, of Rungius' birth. And so we decided to celebrate that in two ways. The first way we're standing in the midst of is called Rungius Reunited. And then the second way is called Rungius Rarely Seen. So we'll talk about this first, and then we'll move in there. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. But I wanted to ask first, how many of you have been to Jackson Lake Lodge? Probably almost everybody. How many of you have been to the Bronx Zoo? That's pretty great. Because these paintings that you see around us have made this great, amazing journey from the New York Zoological Society, the Bronx Zoo, to Grand Teton National Park, Jackson Lake Lodge, and then to here and to the museum in Cody, the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Rungius was commissioned by the New York Zoological Society to paint basically one major painting a year to illustrate species of North American wildlife. He didn't paint them all this size. There's a bunch that are this size, there's a bunch that are smaller. And so you could go to the Bronx Zoo in between 1920 and 1940 and see the animals out in their habitats or cages. And then you could go in this gallery and see these amazing paintings of them in their natural habitat, as only our friend Paul Rungius could paint them. The gallery existed in this form for, until about 1940. It was disbanded as the Rockefellers developed Jackson Lake Lodge. They borrowed these paintings from the New York Zoological Society. They had them installed, I believe, since the lodge opened. And then they were there. The Jackson Hole Preserve, which is the Rockefellers, ended up purchasing the paintings. And then in these complicated transactions of the Rockefellers turning the lodge over to the park, they held back these paintings, and they decided the paintings would be better served if they lived on in the two museums which border the park. So Cody got 4 paintings, and we got 4 paintings. But even today, there are reproductions of these works that are in Jackson Lake Lodge in the original place where they hung. So we're super grateful and lucky to have our own pieces out, obviously, but then these works up there are all from the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. They were very gracious to lend them to us for the summer. I'm hoping maybe they'll lend them to us for a little bit longer because they're so great up there. Then you'll notice a little bit of difference between the frames. If you look at those photos over there in the didactic panel we have, they had one style of frame when they were in New York. When they moved to Jackson Lake Lodge, they reframed all of them in this green wooden frame, which to me seems like it's kind of lodgy and rustic, but also the Jackson Lake Lodge was very contemporary, so they're not smooth. So they were good to go with that architecture in that space. When we got the paintings here, we had them all reframed in something, again, entirely different that we felt would go with our collection, and Cody has left them in their original frame. So that's one kind of interesting tidbit to notice. Any questions about Rungius Reunited? So this is the first time these paintings have been seen together since they moved from Jackson Lake Lodge in about 1992.
Did we have any say which ones came to us, or were we given the 3 that we received?
Everybody got 4, and so the 2 little ones are in there. That is a story I'm trying to track down, whether Cody picked one and we picked one, and then Cody picked one and we picked one. I'm not quite sure how that worked out. One story I do know is that we ended up with this one, the black bear, and it was very dirty and grimy. It had been in Jackson Lake Lodge where it had been exposed to cigarette smoke and all kinds of things for many, many years. Very dirty, and at the time, we felt like we'd kind of gotten the runt of the litter. But they sent it to be conserved and cleaned, and ended up, to me, being one of the best examples of the whole lot. So,
how did Glenbow end up with the ones that they got from them?
So I think at a certain point, after the gallery at the New York Zoological Society was disbanded, you know, they kind of went their different ways. The society held on to some of them for a while, but then slowly they de-accessioned them or sold them. And then Eric Harvey, who founded the Glenbow collection, basically, did buy, I don't know, 4, 6. They have quite a few of the large ones also up there. If you look in the historical photo, the big elk that's above the gallery, main gallery door is at Glenbow, and I think they have a polar bear. So they end up with a bunch of large ones as well. The funniest one to me, I think, is of walruses. Rungius was not a great walrus painter, so the least good of all of them. But luckily, the ones that ended up here are clearly animals of this region, and I feel like we got the ones that are really of this specific place. That wolf is set in Wyoming. The bison over there are on the plains in front of the Wyoming Range. And then this guy could be, you know, right down there in Grand Teton National Park. So yeah, it's really exciting to have these. And they'll be up all summer through Western Visions. So all of our Western Visions folks can see them as well.
Adam,
yep.
Can we introduce our wonderful artist, Johnny?
Dr. Smith is here with us today. Rungius fan.
Very knowledgeable.
Knows all places in the Wind Rivers where Rungius went to paint.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And we're going to see some of those Wyoming pieces when we go back. Feel free to break off at any time, and I'll try to keep us in time. But here are the other 2, the smaller pieces that were in Jackson Lake Lodge, and then migrated, I like to say, to Cody and Jackson. Which one's from Cody? Yeah, exactly. The Wolverine, which is a really great painting. He didn't paint Wolverines very often, and I think Tammy, our associate curator, said, "Why didn't Rungius ever paint birds?" And then maybe if you look at those 2 birds, you can say it wasn't his forte. No, he's not the best thing for him. So Rungius, rarely seen Rungius, brings out a bunch of work from our collection that doesn't get viewed very often. In part because maybe some of its work's on paper, it's fragile, we can't show it all the time. But what's really amazing about this collection is that there are so many neat connections that there are between different pieces. So we tried to bring that out in this exhibit. The collection in total is 645 cataloged items, and there's a breakdown down there about, there's I think 100 paintings, 100 landscapes, and then there's photos, letters, prints, etc. So we have this amazing collection with all these great connections within it. Tying back into the New York Zoological Society, behind you are 2 of the inhabitants of the feline house at New York Zoological Society. You don't get to see Rungius painting lions very often. Sultan was a really famous lion, a sort of celebrity at the time. A Barbary lion, which is now an extinct subspecies, who lived there in the early 1900s. And that painting has never been on view here in the museum. It was in a private collection and was donated to us last year. So we've got that kind of thing. You rarely see Rungius painting a shipwreck, you know. I think that ship is on the east coast of the United States, but it's probably in eastern Maine or something. scene of shipwreck. A really early painting of a pronghorn from probably one of his first trips to Wyoming down here. And then there's a whole bunch of fun things to talk about in terms of Rungius and his printmaking process. We won't go into a ton of detail at this point, but Rungius made these dry point etchings, engravings that you see on the wall. For a large part of his career, they were a great source of a little bit of additional income during the Depression and afterwards. And so what he would do is he would take his original painting as a model for his dry point, and then create an etching. So if you couldn't buy the painting, you could at least have a version of it. So these were also limited edition, truly limited. Some of the things you see today that say limited edition come in an edition of 1,000, and that's fine. But this was basically 100 or less. So there are 100 or fewer, 100 or less prints in each of these editions. This is called Old Bald Face. That painting has been out quite often, but we don't get to show it with this very often. So that's the fun connection. When you make a print, you end up with the reverse of what's on your image, just the way the printing plate technology works. So Rungius, to create this, would have taken a black and white photo of this painting, held it up to the light, traced it in reverse, and then put that on his printing plate, and then when he pulled the print, it came out in the same orientation. If you look over there, an old fighter, that moose print is in the opposite. So when he started off, he was it was in the opposite orientation, and then he figured out this method of making them resemble each other. Old Fighter was the best-selling print. I think there's 105 of those that he sold. And right next to it, in Fighting Mood, there's only 3 copies that he made of this, and we are the only place that I know of that has a copy of it. So there's 2 more of these out there somewhere, and we don't know where they are. So I'll tell a little bit of museum history story. When we were down on the town square, the Kerrs had collected an almost complete collection of all of these prints. So they had 99%. They did not have this print. They couldn't find it because it is so rare. So we moved up here to this building, and at the opening gala in 1994, the trustees presented this print to them as a really cool, fun way to mark the opening of this facility and as a great way to complete this collection. So,
They find it.
it was, a dealer had it, and the behind-the-scenes story is that a dealer had it and knew how rare it was, and so they paid an exorbitant amount of money for it, but we're really happy to have it here. 2 sketches for In Fighting Mood, blanket, and again, that's the kind of interesting thing that we can bring out in a short-term exhibit like this that you can't have out on view all the time. Because if you have this out on view all the time, the colors fade, the paper degrades, etc. So we'll talk a little bit, I'll tell 2 more stories and then everyone can disband if they want. We also have this great collection of landscape studies. So Rungius would go out in the field every single summer, whether it was out here in the Wind Rivers or in Banff, and Banff National Park. And he would create these little landscape studies of the scenes that he saw, summer and fall. So you see some winter, and you see the animals in their peak season. And because we have such a great collection, there are instances where we have the landscape study that he was looking at when he painted the finished painting. So that is a really fun connection that we can make. So you can see that he painted in the field, and then when he was back in his studio in New York, he used it to create this painting. And so you can see that is a very close resemblance. So he used the background and the trees and the slope, and he inserted a bear in there. Sometimes he would say, I'm going to paint a moose in the pines, and I want a snowy background. So he would take a snowy background from one scene, the pines from something else, and then a moose that he had seen in an entirely different place. So it wasn't, he was going out, he saw this bear in this spot, and that's what he's going to paint. But he had the skills and the ability to blend all these different elements to come up with these compositions that, in the end, were better than if he had just like, oh, I shot this photo of this bear there, and that's what I'm going to take.
He shot a lot of photos, too.
He did take a lot of photos. We have a few photos back here. So then this is an example of another pretty closely matched scene, but we put this out here because it's a sort of a similar feeling, similar style, and he might have referred to that also as he was painting this other piece. This is probably the second rarest of the dry point prints. The pack scene, people loved Rungius for his wildlife, so we think maybe the pack scene wasn't as great of a seller because it wasn't what quite he was known for. And then another example of the fun connections we have in this collection, these two elk paintings, painted at different times, painted in the same sort of setting but in a very different way. And we think they're probably 10, if not 20 years apart in difference. So it shows him going back, revisiting different scenes. This is the Bow River, right outside of Banff in Alberta, Canada. But it's really fun to just look at the difference of those two things and think about him going back and painting that scene a couple of times at least.
Which was done first?
So his signature is a little bit of a giveaway. As he gets older, his signature gets bolder and looser. So this one is a little bit tighter than this one. And I could be totally wrong because he didn't date his paintings. I think I'm right, but it's open to debate. So a lot of things, we don't have the labels up yet, but the labels you'll say circa this or circa that, because it's hard to know exactly when he did these works. He didn't always paint wildlife, as we were saying. So there's a beautiful Hereford there, a cavalry guy, and then this is a ranch he stayed at in Pinedale, Cora area. This is on loan from the Lozier family. That's their barn. And then this is a log that he used while he was at that ranch to clean his brushes. So this is an actual piece of log that the family saved and lent to us for this exhibit. And then these are some beautiful Wyoming scenes, and Tucker could tell you exactly where these things are. And what's fun about this is that this is an example of something he would have done out in the field. It's kind of quickly, lightly painted. Then he refined it later on for an exhibit, in this case at the Salmagundi Club in New York. So he would have exhibited that at Salmagundi Club, which is still in existence today. Some of people we know from Jackson still exhibit there. Catherine Turner, Jen Hoffman, there's a Plein Air Society exhibit there, and they'll be in it. So it's really neat, again, ongoing connection between those two. And then one more funny, I know I keep saying one more thing, but there's a lot of fun things to show. In addition to Western wildlife and animals that you might not anticipate, Rungius also went to Hawaii. So these four paintings are from his trip to Hawaii. And again, you see this example of him doing a field study and then doing a final version later on, using that as the inspiration to paint. These are a little bit closer in execution. But anyway, it's kind of another interesting connection that we have. There's a farm, and then here's this beautiful seascape. And then that is a wild water buffalo right there. Oh, and a watercolor. You don't see Rungius watercolors very often. So, to keep us on track time-wise, I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to take off if you need to. And yeah, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.